what do you see as the successor to liberalism? Or is that even not the right question to ask for the world as it emerges in a post-liberal order?
Yeah, I think the question is what will be the successors? I think that liberalism, again, because of its need to universalize, and that's the reason it won the race, is it's so good at scaling society, it's so good at scaling the larger economic and political order, that it became a hegemonic view in a way that it didn't exist until, like I said, perhaps Western Christendom is the only other thing that you could kind of map onto that. And so I think that you're going to see that that's going to come apart. And when it does, I think that things are going to shrink down again more to particular. I think you're going to see zones of control, multiple civilizations, multipolarity. And I think that you'll see when you don't have the United States and the wider Western alliance enforcing liberal democracy on every single civilization, I think you'll see more natural forms of those civilizations in the way that they politically organize emerge. I think you're going to see a lack of homogenization across all of these different government forms.
That's interesting. So are you buying into Huntington's kind of clash of civilizations? Are you buying into or do you think it's even more regional than that? I mean, do you think that there are just these large sweeping forces, Islam being one of them, totalizing? And I guess to a large extent inherent within that are these universalizing narratives. Liberalism is one of them. My good friend Carl Benjamin from London, he's a kind of I think he self-describes I can't remember what he told me.
Liberalist, or was that the? No, he's abandoned that now. We've been working on Carl for a while. He's abandoned liberalism.
He's like a postmodern classicalist or a postmodern
traditionalist.
Yeah, that's what he said. A postmodern traditionalist. So when I first heard those two words, it was like nails on a chalkboard. I was so disturbed by the pairing of those two words that I really almost had to sit down. But is that a kind of vision? Do you share that kind of postmodern traditionalism?
So I think the postmodern traditionalism is a little bit of tongue in cheek. It's a kind of a joke term that's been I think that's been ascribed more by enemies than like reactionary. It's a term that
the view that's embedded in that is that there's no natural telos, there's no historical outcomes. Like you see that the Hungarians doing it, you see the Poles to a certain extent doing it. They have certain geopolitical realities that the Hungarians don't. I was just in Bratislava and I had many conversations with people there, and you see this kind of you see this with Pine Fortune, you see this in Argentina, you see this in Italy. So to recenter the discussion, you don't believe, this is what I'm perceiving, you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't believe there's an inevitable trajectory that societies take given that there's a particular governing ideology that can be universalized and that will be universalized and then institutionalized broad scale throughout the systems in the judiciary, et cetera. Like you don't foresee that.
No,
is that correct?
I think between Huntington and Fukuyama, Huntington clearly won, and I think that you are seeing a return to this. As Huntington goes on about Spengler and Toynbee and all of these different who predicted that that these things would largely not be compatible in long term, and I think that's correct. And so I don't think that there will be one universalization. I think there is a telos, but I think it's to peoples, not to humanity at large.
I want to throw a quick monkey wrench into the gears of this conversation. I think we're talking about the West primarily when we're talking about liberalism and whether it's going to fall. But if we're talking about these geopolitical realities, it's also important to keep in mind China, Russia, as well as the Middle Eastern world, which right now seems to be aligning more with the China-Russia axis, and what influence that has as far as an expanding empire. If, for example, America says we're going to go inwards, we're going to focus on ourselves, America first, and then little by little, more territory is going to be acquired by these other powers, will they go the same route that Auron, you're talking about, or is it going to be more of this empire building, and then what?
Well, multipolarity is just... I think it's moving that direction. I think the inability of again the West to maintain its hegemony, or it seems to be loosening, and you're going to see the alliances of countries that are arrayed against kind of the current NATO powers naturally, but I don't think that makes them long-term natural allies. Some of them have imperial ambitions, some of them don't. Whether or not that's it's within the Chinese to build a global spanning empire.
Well,
I guess
Russia certainly does, and I don't want to harp on Russia for this conversation, but I mean,
you're Lev. Of course, you're going to harp on Russia.
I'm Lev. Of course, I'm going to. I mean, look at the shirt that I'm wearing here. Of course, I'm going to harp on Russia. No, but the idea.
Let's see the shirt. I can't see it.
Slava Ukraini. There we go. So the reason why I bring this up, though, is because I'm not sure that those kind of old school empires like Russia, let's say, where we've had not only Putin, but his advisors and Medvedev talking about wanting to take the various states like Poland and so on and so forth. And the question here is, are they going to approach it from the same direction as, let's say, a theoretical like America and Europe? If America and Europe were the only places left on this earth, then maybe we could see like there being like this sprinkling of different ideologies, different people who are starting to wall themselves off from the barbarian horde and all of that. But I'm not exactly sure that that's going to be the same way it's going to work when you have this expansionist power kind of reviving not even the USSR, but you could say like the old school Russian Empire with the help of China. And also with the help of the Middle East. Like, I'm not really seeing that same trajectory going on there, nor am I seeing a multipolar world in the sense of, okay, you're going to keep your side, I'm going to keep my side. It almost seems like it's going to be expanding until it stops. So what I'm seeing is World War III, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, geopolitical realities is that power will expand until it meets an opposing force. That's just how all political power has ever worked. I think empires are the natural formations of kind of geopolitics. The only thing that checks the size of one empire is another. I understand that you're not a fan of the Russians, Lev, and that's okay. Like, Vladimir Putin's not a good person, but that doesn't, in and of itself, that doesn't change the reality of whether or not the Western political alliance will hold. Right? Your desires for the Russians not to expand doesn't really have any bearing on whether or not the continuation of a unipolar world really will be.
Just so you understand where I'm coming from here, if they're going to expand in this multipolar world, I'm curious what both you and Peter think is going to happen to America then, because I was talking about like the Russia-China alliance, but like you said, an empire is going to keep going until it's stopped by some other force. Will that force...
Or until it becomes fiscally insolvent, which we're well on our way to.
Which is what we did, right.
Yeah, but is it going to be the same thing with them? Like, will America and Europe be that opposing force? Or are you guys saying that liberalism has reduced the West in general to a state of complete weakness, where this Russia-China alliance is going to kick our ass and, bend us over and do whatever they want with us?
No, so I like that. I like that's a pretty. I wouldn't have used that, but that crude descriptor is pretty good in this case. So I think so. There are a lot of variables here. I think Americans don't have an appetite for foreign adventures, so shall we say, anymore. I think Afghanistan was a catastrophe, an absolute catastrophe in terms of blood, in terms of money. One thing that we're not talking about is the One Belt, One Road policy of China. China is making tremendous inroads into Africa. We're not talking about the ability. So I'll be in Taiwan, in a month, and we're going to explore the topic with spectrum street epistemology of reunification. And I think that there are so many variables on the table, and I will say, Liv, I'm not an expert in geopolitics by any stretch of the imagination. I'm deeply disturbed by what's going on in Ukraine, and it is also my understanding. Again, I'm speaking outside my area. That didn't the Duma, and Medvedev say that the Balkans are next early on, and then didn't he talk about the Poles? Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. I don't mean to shill, but that is exactly what I wrote in the last Lev's Lens Substack article, where Medvedev said exactly that. He specifically claimed that the Baltic countries also belong to Russia and referred to Poland as being, quote unquote, temporarily occupied. But again, I want to make sure we don't dwell too much on the geopolitics side.
This is right. But this is important because in the context of liberalism, what does this mean for liberalism? So I think before September 11th, I think that there was this idea that, there's during the Clinton administration, there's going to be a peace dividend. Everybody's going to be happy. We're going to see increasingly with the internet, we're going to see liberalization, particularly in China. Nobody anticipated that the United States companies and businesses would bow, whether it's the NBA or where he gave his apology when he spoke about China as a country, the big guy, the muscular guy. Anyway,
John Cena.
Yeah, John Cena. Yeah, he was in. I watched him in a while ago. Something where he was like in a superhero thing. He was just absolutely fantastic. But just parenthetically, but so I don't. Nobody foresaw that coming, and so the question is, all of these thought experiments of liberalism, these Rawlsian thought experiments, where just people sit down and see if they can reason to, not rationalize, but reason to the best systems for distribution of goods and services, for, what does a fair society looks like. These are very seductive, and I must admit that I am very partial to them myself. But the reality is, you're both correct. There are, I think Auron was very politic when he said Putin is not a nice guy, castrating Ukrainian men and kidnapping children and raping women, and as a unlike the My Lai massacre, when people were held accountable for that, and incidents in Fallujah, these are not disciplined or punished, but actually used as motivators. And Lev, you know more about that. So the question, centering it back on liberalism again, is, given these foreign actors, not nice people, given nuclear weapons, given China's ambitions through soft power, what do we see as the fate of liberalism? I think that there's wisdom in Kissinger's writings when he basically spoke of the United States, Russia, and China as a balanced world where we wouldn't have to worry about these, although he didn't use the word asymmetrical, and Hitchens' writing on Kissinger is excellent, where we wouldn't have to see these asymmetrical power differentials, where we'd worry about different things. It would keep the world in balance. The world right now is not subject to the ambition to liberal ambitions, but rather it's being eroded at every turn. It's being internally in the United States, and I would argue Donald Trump is a symptom of that. But it's also been eroded externally, and so many of the hopes of what we can achieve by the universalization of liberalism have been kicked out of people. So I'm actually sympathetic to Auron's point. I don't know. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I have not been particularly optimistic by what we've seen in the world in the last 10 years.